Authority, a joint meeting of the Public Authority and Nonprofit Corporation. Before we do some introductions to the folks in the back, we now are not just on video, but we are on audio, as you see in front of you. So, Holden, if we need to speak louder, let us know. But
okay, it sounded good so far. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for being here. All right, can we start off with intros? Front row to the right, my right.
I'm Ed Phillips. I'm the CEO of the Burke County Tourism Development Authority, and I'm on a fact-finding tour of how other TDAs and boards operate.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Nice to see you, Ann.
Morning, everybody. My name is Richie Rozelle. I know some of you, but I am the Director of Content, stepping into Kat Kessler's position here at Explore Asheville, and I'm happy to be here today and to work for this great team.
Hey, Mayor. I'm Nicole Will with Asheville Wellness Tours, and just here to learn more and continue to support some people who are really important to us in our business.
My name is Holden Metz with Sunshine Request.
Hi, Cindy Stein here with 360i. I am the media lead from the advertising agency.
Nick Smart. I'm also with 360i, and I'm a media supervisor for the agency.
I'm David Nutter, a city and county planner, now officially retired, but working very actively with city leaders like Julie May.
I'm Samantha Cole, and the local government liaison at the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Samantha Fan, General Manager of the Princess Anne Hotel and Membership Chair for the Asheville Bed and Breakfast Association.
Good morning, I'm Julia Akers. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications for the Alameda Parking.
I'm Jim Muth. I'm with the Asheville Buncombe Hotel Association.
John Ellis, prior TDA board member.
Jane Anderson, Asheville Independent Restaurant Association, AO.
Good morning, I'm Rick Bell. I'm the owner of Dignity Inn and Candler and the president of the Asheville Bed and Breakfast Association.
Tina Kinsey, Director of Marketing and Air Service Development at Asheville Regional Airport. Good morning.
Hi, Bob Michelle. I'm a homestay host and also a member of the Asheville Homestay Network.
Sarah Kilgore, Director of Advertising at Explore Asheville.
Jeff Bradford, President of Asheville Buncombe Regional Sports. Asheville Buncombe Regional Sports.
That's such a ring.
Sharon Tangle, Director of Black Mountain Chamber of Commerce.
John Brooks, President of the Board of the Black Mountain Chamber of Commerce.
John Boyle, a reporter with the Citizen Times.
Christy Miller Consulting.
Lacey Crossan, Jack Bay.
Is that everyone? All right, well, welcome again. So there's more? All right, first on the agenda is approval of the board meetings from our November meeting that were sent you in advance. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Second. Mr. Luckett, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No comments. Okay, motion approved. Thank you. Donna, financial reports.
Two of them, so we'll start with November. Page one, the revenues, total revenues was $2.2 million. Occupancy tax is up 39.7%. That's up 3.9% from the prior year, same time. Expenditures are at $1.9 million, and the budget right there is 22.1%. The revenues exceeded expenditures by $321,000, which added to the net change in fund balance of the $3.389 million. Ending fund balance for the month is $13 million. On page 2, this shows the 75.5% split. This the October room sales relates to the November revenues. October was up 7%, and then year-to-date is up 4%. Going to page 3, which is the product development fund. Total budget for projects is $23.8 million. To date, spent $5.7 million. There's still $17.6 million in commitments outstanding. Product development fund administration, $699,000 budgeted, $86,000 has been spent, leaving $612,000 remaining. Going to the balance sheet on page 4, this shows the current snapshot of payable, 17.6, ties back to page 3, which is the remaining payments. And then-
Dawn, before you move on from that page, I just wanted to remind the board and emphasize that in the unassigned fund balance also represents budgeted revenues that have not yet been expended. And so for a true understanding of the fund balance that's available to the board, you would go back to the June 30th final financials that were in the audit. And so the actual unassigned fund balance at the end of the fiscal year was $3,087,000. Thank you.
Pages 5 through 8 show detailed breakdowns on month to month, and then over the 3-year average. And for October, it's a 6% change from the prior year. On page 6, this shows a breakout between hotel, motel, vacation rentals, and bed and breakfast. And you can see how they are trending. And then there's more trend information on pages 7 and 8 on the breakout space. Questions on this? Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What, looking at this page, are we normally sort of 2 months behind? I feel like we're normally 1 month behind.
We had
We have another set to go through.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Sorry, that was just because we didn't have a December.
We didn't have a December meeting.
Oh, this is the November 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, got it.
We'll do October. So
Got it.
Thank you for an easy question.
Hope they're all easy.
I have a question. 2020 numbers on page 7, the bottom half, we've got 2020 numbers for months that haven't passed.
That's fiscal 20.
Fiscal.
So that's July
Okay,
of
right,
2019.
half of 20,
Yeah, I know, it's
of 19,
confusing.
thank you.
It's another easy one.
It's a little
Yes.
brain bender.
Thank you.
Okay, Don Cameron.
December.
We need a motion.
Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Motion approved.
Okay, financials for December, and then we'll be caught up. Current month, total revenues were $1.8 million, occupancy tax was 1.7, and we're at 48.9% of budget, and it's up 4.6% from the prior year. Expenditures are at $1.2 million, and that's at 27.9% of budget. Revenues exceeded expenditures by $557,000, and that added to the net change in fund balance of $4.05 million. Ending fund balance was $13.68 million. On page 2, this is the 75-25 split. So these are the November room sales for the December reports. And for the month, 8% increase, and for the year, 5%. On page 3, this is the Tourism Development Fund, and we have the 23.38 budgeted. We've spent $6 million, leaving $17.3 million. For administrative expense, $699 budgeted, $176,000 has been spent, with $522,000 remaining. The balance sheet is on page 4. Here's a snapshot. Again, the amount for future events payable ties back to page 3, which is the amount we have today. And then we have the same room sale information breakouts on pages 5, 6, 7, and 8.
I guess I'd also just like to point out on page 5, we made a change. In previous years, our budget objective had been a 5% increase in growth, and so the yellow line was representing a 5% increase, and so we changed that to reflect the actual budget increase of 3%. And so to make it easy to understand, when the green bar hits the yellow line, we're on budget.
Any questions of Don? Is there a motion on the floor to approve?
Motion approved.
Mr. Selwyn, second.
Second.
Mr. Kabir. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any discussion? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Don. President's report, Ms. Brown.
Before I get into that, I'll
Oh, the
address
penalty waiver, I'm
penalty
sorry.
waiver. Thank you. You received all of the backup information in your packet regarding the penalty waiver. The penalty of $990.50 exceeds the administrative limit for taking care of this. It doesn't qualify for administrative approval. The general manager of the hotel had intended to pay online on the 20th. She unexpectedly was at the hospital with a family member on the 21st when she went back online to pay. The penalty was required to complete the transaction online. And so she submitted a check in the amount of the taxes due that was received and posted on the 25th. Are there any questions? So for any new board members, the process is that this board has the authority to recommend dismissing the penalty or not, and then that would go to the county commissioners for final approval.
Quick question for Don. I know that when I pay my sales tax online, I can set a date in the future to have it paid. Does our system allow people to do that? So if I went in on the 10th and scheduled it for the 20th, I could do that?
I honestly don't know. I'd have to check into that.
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so. Okay.
I unfortunately recall having to cash flow manage paying this at times, and I don't believe you can do that. I think you have to log in and actually take care of it at that time.
That'd be a nice enhancement because I do one in Florida and you can set the date. That's a good point.
Can I make a motion to?
Yeah, any questions on that?
Oh, any questions? I'm sorry.
Is there a motion
To recommend to waive.
motions to recommend to waive a waiver?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Right, ready for the president's report?
I'm ready.
All right, so with the addition of Kathy Peterson to our team, we have things to show you. I just thought it would be nice for you to get a little visual glimpse into some of the things that we've been doing since we last saw you. Whoops, wrong button. Oops. Okay, here we go. So Pat Kappas has been leading our collaboration on the African American Heritage Trail. I think you'll all remember that this was a grant request that was received through the TPDF application process, and you approved funding for the museum at Stevens Lee with the Riverfront Development Group, and then also approved funding for consultancy and a partnership with Explore Asheville to engage the community in a process to develop this heritage trail. And so we've been doing the community engagement part of that. We began with some stakeholder phone interviews. I want to just really emphasize that the applicant, Catherine Mitchell and Veronica Gunter, really are driving this process with our support. This is not something that Explore Asheville has taken over and are just moving forward. We're here as supporting partners for the applicants and then the community as it rolls out. And so PGAB is the consultant on this job, and they, a consultant team working with Dina Bailey, who's an expert in this field of developing cultural assets. They did some telephone interviews to inform these listening sessions, and so 4 sessions were held at various locations and different times of day. We had about 75 attendees. we had great media coverage, on this initiative, including these outlets. The radio interview was especially fun. That's Veronica Gunter next to me and Miss Mitchell. And then we did interviews with WLOS. But it was really great to just see the enthusiasm and sort of just sincerity over how important folks are feeling like this project is. In great partner news, wow, congratulations to the airport. Not only announcing new nonstop service to some really important markets. I don't know how many of you even remember when we did the TDA funded the Air Service Development Task Force. Tina, was that in 2014, 13, 15? Okay. And then in partnership with the airport, and one of the conclusions was, you really kind of have to fight for stuff that might not be the top of your priority list, so that you build your numbers and you build your track record. And Tina and Lou have done an amazing job of leading that effort. And so last month, new nonstops on Allegiant were announced from Houston, Austin, Chicago, and Boston. Boston has been real high on my wish list as a great market for us to bring visitors to the community. Then they followed up on that announcement by announcing a 43% increase in enplanements for 2019. And so 2018 was the first year that the airport broke 1 million passengers, and then ended 2019 at 1.6 million. I think, obviously, why that's so important to our region is, not only that it makes it easier for visitors to come to Asheville, but it makes, for people who live here to be able to travel conveniently and affordably to places they need to go to work, and kids who are in college is such an important resource for the community. We were also thrilled by our close partner, David Whitehill, at the Asheville Symphony, to be named among the top 30 most important people in the music professional environment. So we wanted to highlight his accomplishment and offer our congratulations. We had a partner forum. Was that last week? Yeah. Seems like a year ago. So in this partner forum, we provided an update on some of our most recent sales and marketing initiatives, and had about 70 people turn out for this winter event. We also, the TMIP process has continued. We have had 2 more meetings with the public partners, meaning the city and the county and the UNC Asheville teams. Just this week, we offered 4 different sessions for Community Leadership Council members to come in and emphasize any priorities that they're hearing from their constituent stakeholders. This is really, that part of the process where the consultant team is really digging in to make sure that they're understanding potential projects, and we'll be moving forward towards a report in April. But we still have we're getting kind of close to the end in a time period perspective. But the next phase is when PGAV will bring back their perspective and say, based on everything we've heard, here's some drawings, here's some tourism management strategies that, that we recommend to deal with some of the negative impacts and some of the concerns that we've heard from the community. So our sales team, sorry, I have a note here to get this right. So this is our sales team with some partners. In December, the Explore Asheville joined forces with 8 of our industry partners at the AENC trade show. And so attendees from the trade show visited the Asheville booth and brought care kit items, and then the team packed those care kits and to include things like toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, tissue, shampoo, body wash, hand warmers, socks, and chapstick. And a total of 50 care kits were provided. We had our holiday party in early December. We had more than 300 tourism partners attended this event. With our signature events, typically we have a charitable component, and so Toys for Tots is the annual beneficiary of tourism partner contributions, and so this year we collected 4 boxes, really big boxes filled with toys, and $750 in cash donations. I would emphasize that, you know, the Renaissance has been an extraordinarily generous host of this event, and Toys for Tots is a very high priority for their team, and so it's been a really great partnership to welcome tourism partners for some great year-end networking, but then also to fill an important need. And it's nice that our party comes kind of early in the month. So here are some of the attendees, more than 300. We also, this is the event where we recognize some standout tourism partners. This year we recognized Cleesta Cotton, who's a local artist and educator, Ken Stamps, who's the co-founder of Navitat. I think you all know him. Brenda Durden, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Asheville Hotel Group and has been really a driving force in the development of Sweet Dreams full plates. I'm sure you'll all remember that more than 30 local hotels dedicate the month of September to raising funds for Manna Food Bank. Does anybody remember what the total was? It's hundreds of thousands of meals provided through that partnership. And Lisa White, who's the VP at White Labs. So I'd like to thank the sponsors again because, you know, we really have very limited expense in this because of the generosity of the Renaissance, U.S. Foods, Biltmore provides the wine, Asheville Brewing provided the beer for this event, and Omni Grove Park Inn provides wine as well. Okay. We've provided very lengthy recaps to you for all of our activities for November and December. Are there any questions? Okay. Any questions about the stats or the quick list for November, December? I will say just in general, you know, we had experienced some softness, especially in late summer and early fall, and so we're really happy to see very strong performance in November and December. And in my next presentation, we'll get into we'll be touching on some forecasts of expectations.
And a 37% increase, Tina, in air traffic. Congratulations on that.
You know, I also, just for the airport, I want to say, as an airport board member and frequent user of the airport, you know, it's great to have those big numbers, but to be able to adjust your operations to so, you know, graciously be able to receive all those visitors, I'm just so proud every time, you know, I fly back into the airport and it's super clean and the staff is really nice, and, you know, really proud of our airport.
I think it's great for business travel as well. There was that nice article on GE.
Yeah.
And the more flights we can get up here, the more business, easy it is to get business is to move here, which is a real challenge for us.
Okay. Next item is the Finance Committee. I'm happy to announce that we have appointed a Finance Committee, and they all accepted their roles. And those members are Chip Craig as the chairman, John Luckett as a member, John Ellis, and Ron Storto. So they will be our Finance Committee going into the balance of the fiscal year. So, point of information. Okay?
All right, great.
Thank you. The Asheville Art Museum that's on the agenda, that has been pushed to next month, so we do not have a report on that at this moment. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No.
And next up is Marla, Cindy, and Nick to talk about the advertising campaign.
So, and with your permission, I have a little bit of introductory information. We'll let Donna change this over.
So Stephanie's going to provide the information, and then the agency is going to share the plan, and then I will detail the recommended action.
I'll stand over here for the sake of the microphone, since happy to welcome so many people this month. I just wanted to provide some context for bringing this proposal to you for your consideration. You know, over the past several years, the board in budget deliberations has directed staff and decided to, you know, budget pretty conservatively, with the expectation that the market would overperform the budget and that would provide additional fund balance resources that the board could use at its discretion. So there's been really a stated objective to allow the fund balance to grow. This is the wrong deck. We'll just go with it. And, you know, and additionally to be able to access the fund balance for need periods. So currently, the total amount in the fund balance that's available for the discretion of the board is about $6 million. I would point out that that is really only about 4 months of administrative, not administrative, but it equals about 4 months of our annual budget. So it's not excessive. Our fund balance policy is still, you know, pretty aggressive to not carry a really significant amount of resources in the fund balance because, you know, the responsibility of the TDA is to utilize the funds available to continue to bring visitors to Asheville for the benefit of our local businesses. You know, but as we look ahead and our responsibility as staff to, you know, kind of anticipate changes in the marketplace that, you know, are on the horizon, and as the board has pointed out, we're, you know, in a presidential election year. I kind of feel like we're always in a presidential election these days, and that adds to, you know, consumer anxiety, and it typically is associated with softening in travel intentions. It makes advertising more expensive, and there's more clutter in the marketplace. You know, in terms of how our market's doing, you know, Buncombe County leads our comp set. You know, when we look at Charleston, Savannah, Gatlinburg, Richmond, you know, you're familiar with our comp set. You know, we actually are the top of our comp set in terms of occupancy, average daily rate, RevPAR, and as you know, we use those hotel statistics as a proxy for the health of the tourism industry that affects so many, you know, more than 1,200 local businesses. And so, you know, we had a couple of months where, you know, we had some softness, but in terms of demand, you know, we're at about 3.8% for the running 12 months, and that's great. When we look at the incoming supply, we have a supply increase in the coming year of 10%. So room supply is slated to increase by 817 this year. This, you know, we're kind of, you know, hitting the bubble in terms of supply increase. So we've all been aware of the total supply increase over a 5-year time period. And it's been 412 last year. It was about 460 in 2017. We've done a great job of absorbing that room supply, especially in the context of, you know, we have room supply growth in, you know, in other categories, in vacation rental and also in short-term rental. So we're looking at over 800 rooms coming into the market in the next year. We're currently in a supply in Buncombe County of about 8,200 rooms. So as I said before, that's a 10% increase.
Stephanie, do we know the supply, do we have any way to gauge the supply of short-term rentals that might be coming on the market? Or is that leveled off? I think it's kind of leveled off nationally, but.
Well, and you know, I mean, obviously, you know, that's so flexible, right? Because people put them on, take them off. I think the growth has slowed. You know, we were looking at, you know, kind of doubling every year, and we're not seeing that at this point. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that, you know, as more hotel supply opens up and, you know, whatever other regulatory factors are in place, there seems to be, you know, maybe we're kind of hitting the maximum amount that, you know, people are interested in offering. So. On a national level, you know, national trends are pointing to a slowdown in travel for 2020. Smith, they go by STR now. We kind of know them as Smith Travel Research. Like, don't call us that anymore. But when, you know, their headline news is that, you know, although the hotel industry posts record levels in 2019, it's the slowest growth since the recession. So, you know, when we've been in a long period of economic expansion and growth in tourism, you know, we tend to start to take that for granted. When we look back to 2009, RevPAR dropped 17%. So, you know, we've been in recent years in RevPAR growth of 8%, 7%, 5%, but in the last 3 years, we've been at 3%, 3%, and then last year just 0.9%. You know, other indicators, you know, they're expecting for supply growth to continue to be steady and that demand will, you know, grow at a modest rate of about 1%. So, you know, nationally, you know, we're kind of looking at these trends of probably some consumer anxiety. You know, we're in a very long period of expansion. That's not going to last forever. There'll be increased competition in the marketplace as it becomes more and more cluttered and advertising expenses go up.
Stephanie, is that like the last couple of years as far as national RevPAR? That's not demand growth. That's RevPAR growth, right? 3% roughly. So I mean, there's still demand growth, probably somewhat attributable to the same as the prior years. It's just as supply starts coming online and.
Well, they're projecting an increase in occupancy of less than 1%.
Okay.
I had a deck that had some additional visitor spending, but I'll just talk you through that. I think you're all familiar with it. But I think what's really important to understand is, you know, when you allocate money to attract visitors into the community, that's benefiting a very wide range of businesses. You know, I think you're all familiar with, you know, when we spend $1 on advertising, our studies calculate a $43 return on investment within 6 months in spending at local businesses and $3 in sales tax generation. And so this investment is money in local cash registers plus money in state and local governmental coffers. So 77% of every dollar that comes back into the community is not spent on lodging. It's spent on food and beverage, retail, and entertainment, and then that money flows to, you know, other types of businesses. So that's it by way of background. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think we could just go into the proposal for supplemental funding that would come from the fund balance, and then Marla will wrap up with the recommended fund balance transfer.
Can I just say something real quick? And I know we talked about Buncombe County over year is increasing. That's the whole county itself, so that includes tax revenues collected by short-term rentals, hotels, and bed and breakfast. But it still at the individual property levels, year over year, we're seeing some declines in certain markets in the county, east and south specifically. There's a large decline on RevPAR growth, so it's a negative RevPAR right now.
So can you make this work?
Stephanie,
What's on there is not on there.
what is our ratio of overnight tourists versus day tourists?
So the last time we estimated the volume of visitation was based on 2017 numbers. And so we estimate, Tourism Economics did that study and estimated that we had 3.9 million overnight visitors a year. About a third of those are visiting friends and relatives. And then when you look at accommodation type mix, about 50% are lodging in a hotel. So of 3.9 million overnight visitors, you know, and we know from the STAR report that we're about 2 million room nights in hotels. On the day trip side of things, they estimate 7.2 million day visitors, and as we've talked about, you know, pretty repeatedly, that really is kind of recognizing Buncombe County's role as a regional economic hub. And so again, about a third of those are visiting friends and relatives, and then, you know, it's anyone traveling 50 miles or more for non-regular purposes. And so medical visits, regional shopping, you know, all of those kinds of activities, including tourism. And so, you know, the number of 11 million visitors a year is really not a number of tourists per se.
So just on the 7.2 million day visitors, how much of that is tourist?
I don't know. You know,
Roughly,
we don't.
I mean,
I would say a third is not. I'd have to. I don't know.
Is the 7.2 coming 50 miles, or is that all?
All of it. Yeah. The whole definition is more than 50 miles.
Of 7.2, 50 miles.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
50 miles or more.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, certainly, you know, some of our core markets are for overnight visitation are also core markets for, day visitation. But it's just important to recognize that there's also a lot of, just normal regional activity. It does not include work shed.
That's what I was asking. Okay.
Yeah.
Commuters.
Okay, any other questions?
Thanks, Stephanie. We'll come over to the microphone as well. Really building off of what you just heard from Stephanie and learning that supply of rooms is just continuing to increase while we know that leisure travel is going to really remain a bit flat this year. What we want to do is take the learnings that we've gotten from the last about 10 months and the results that we've seen to continue to bolster the economy, to continue to fill the pipeline for the spring and summer season. We know that our F12 media has been driving results, and that's just not just intuitive, right? We're continuing to look at many different signals that show us what results we are truly driving. We see this from data science, ongoing analysis of our paid media performance. Are people engaging? Are they watching our videos? Are they commenting on social? Are they sharing things? Site traffic, year-over-year site traffic is up over 30%, and there are a multitude of factors at play there. Certainly our paid media is a large one. We are continuing to optimize to make sure that people are coming to the website, showing that their intent to visit. Arrivals, we have seen over a 15% increase in arrivals, and what we're able to do is measure people who've seen our advertising, and then we know that they've come in market based on their activities here in market. So we know that they've touched our media and that it has reached them and brought them to the market, as well as creative response. As you all know, months ago we created a new spot, and we did some testing to make sure that the spot was resonating and to make sure that the TV commercial was driving positive perceptions and attitudes. So what we saw through an online survey that we did, 87% of consumers who saw the spot agreed that after seeing it, Asheville is a destination they would consider traveling. And these were people who didn't know a lot about the destination, a lot about the market, so we know that the commercial really informed them about Asheville as a destination. 91% will consider staying for multiple days, talking about day trippers and overnight visitation, making sure that people are aware of the wealth of activities here and making sure that they want to stay in the area for multiple days. And 90% agreed that it's for someone like them, that the destination is for someone like them. So not only making sure that we're reaching the right people, but also making sure that our advertising and what we're putting in the marketplace is really resonating with them to drive consumers here. These results bolster the economy. Stephanie just spoke a lot about the return and what that means for local businesses, what it means for local cash registers, what it means for the local economy. We're able to provide those customers through these dollars that we're putting into the marketplace. It is bringing people here. They are spending their money. They are supporting jobs for our local communities here and generating incremental tax revenue, which can just be put back into the community to continue to support. So with all of this in mind, we are up here to talk about additional supplemental investment, which will help really fill that pipeline for the crucial spring and summer visitation period. So I'm going to let Nick talk to you a bit about what this incremental investment will actually look like, how it will surface, and how it will be brought to life. Yep.
All right. So thanks for that setup. Going over all those data points and looking at that for us, and when we're asked, and when we want to try to simulate tourism, and we see what we've been doing in the past has been working, we don't want to go in and completely change everything for the immediate time. So we want to make sure that we go in with a mix of things that we know that have been working, but then also introduce some new media tactics that we think would also benefit us in the long run. So what that's going to be is our standard mix of TV that we have currently, radio. We're going to be introducing digital billboards and out of home, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Cinema advertising as well. Obviously keeping the digital going because that's driving a whole bunch of site traffic, and then really maximizing our Google AdWords efforts too. So this is just an overview of the markets and the costs that we're recommending entering in for this recommendation. Our key markets that we're really focusing on from a mass media standpoint are going to be Atlanta, Charlotte, Greensboro, Nashville, and Raleigh. On the digital out-of-home side, you'll see a slight different mix of markets there. The reason that we have a different mix in those markets is we see the importance of being in those markets. The only downside about those markets, though, is that from a media cost standpoint, they're extremely inefficient. What digital out-of-home provides or allows us to do, though, is get in those markets with a cost that is not nearly, normally like New York would be 15x what it would cost to go into a Charlotte or something like that. But we're able to come in with a flat cost and make sure that we reach the New Yorks and the DCs and the Tampas really efficiently and try to spark inspiration to travel here from those markets.
Nick, I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is for the supplemental dollars and doesn't represent all the markets that we're in.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is only incremental. Cinema, we're going to continue with the same markets that we're entering with TV and radio, and then digital and search will be across all of our current markets. So the markets that you see outlined now are on top of the current plan that we have in place.
Hey, Nick, the cinema is kind of new to me, and are you able to segment that by the actual type of movie that's on?
So we can. I'll jump ahead. So for us in cinema, you can pick if it's you can pick genres you want to be in. You could pick the rating of the movie, and you can also pick position in the movie. So for us, the big thing or good thing for cinema is it drives tons of ad recall, tons of awareness, because everybody inside a movie theater is a very captive audience. And so we're making sure that our spots are going to be when the capacity is at 94 to 99%. So we want to make sure all the trailers and all the commercials that we all love to see right before the movie starts, that's when we want to be on.
So when they measure that, do they measure it based on the number of people that have bought tickets? Because I know for me that I use that 20 minutes that they show movies as an opportunity for me to be late for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they're going to be, really, I mean, they're going to be, showing 20 minutes, and I can get there. I know that the movie's not going to start for that amount of time, so I just show up, and because, that drives me out of my mind, actually, to sit there and watch all that.
I was going to say, do we all enjoy that?
I love it. I love going.
We all enjoy it.
I'll be on the opposite end. I like the previews and stuff.
I'll tell you that's not my experience when I'm in the movie. And people have to show up and eat their first bucket of popcorn, right, so they can go back.
My question is how are you measuring that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
I mean, it's $150,000.
Yeah. So the media companies that work along with the cinema or with the movie providers are the ones that do the studies to track the attendance. So each specific vendor has their own forms of measurement, but in post, we have an understanding based on they can count how many tickets have entered in and out based on studies that they serve after to see what the attendance was to make sure that we are given the impressions that we purchased.
So what that means is that if there weren't enough tickets purchased and we had our commercial plays in, then we'll actually get then added value commercials in other theaters to make up for those lost ad views. So we'll make sure that we're getting the eyeballs that we've contracted, even if it's not in the immediate buy.
So it's based on tickets?
Yep.
And do you take into account, like with a movie that would have a lot of children, does that factor into the cost of the impression?
Yeah, so some of the larger it's not necessarily the rating, but it's more based on like the size of the movie. Like an Avengers or something like that might cost more than a more locally produced movie or something like that.
But I think what she's asking, so for example, of what's up there, you've got, The Call of the Wild and Mulan probably have a higher ratio of children in the games than James Bond. So, and, for the most part, children aren't making the decisions to be buyers in the market, so we would think that that would be less valuable to us on a per ticket basis than maybe James Bond would be.
My children are going with
unless they're going to the movie with
Agreed,
Papaw,
Yeah, I mean, the children are certainly there with their parents, right? So if we can get all of them as a family excited about coming here and knowing that it's a family-friendly destination, and within our commercial we're showing them family activities, there still creates
Okay,
a
but
bit
there's
of
measurable value in that as it relates to the opposite, right? Like, that's, I think that's all we're asking is
Yep.
if that's taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And back to sort of the question of how many people are in the theater, is there any consideration of theaters that have reserved seating versus theaters that don't have reserved seating? And my experience over the holidays was I went to see Star Wars, and at the time that the movie was supposed to start, which is when the previews start, the theater was almost empty, and I had bought tickets late, and so I didn't like my seat, so I was like, man, I'm going to move around, and thank goodness I didn't, because 30 minutes later when the previews stopped, the theater was full. So, like, none of those people would have seen this because their seats are reserved, and they can do what Joe does, which is because they don't have to worry about finding a seat.
So closer to the actual movie starting is probably the better spot.
Yeah, so that's the slot that we're going to be in, and the media companies are constantly evaluating the time pods that they delineate based on when the movies are going to start, based on habits like that. So that's constantly changing too, of when the pods start and end.
And this is during that like kind of television feeling part right before previews start.
Exactly.
So the 30 minutes of previews and we're nowhere in that. We're hopefully just before previews start.
That's
right at the start.
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that the reason
I think
we
you're absolutely right.
chose
Reserved seating versus
cinema
not is
is
a
because
drastic situation for
it
release
does
dates.
resonate with what we know about our audience and what we know of who they are. They're going to movies. They're in the theaters. They want to be there. And to Stephanie's earlier point, as well as Nick's, this is something to boost our current plan. And so it will only increase what they are already seeing in other places. So based on the way that we have planned our core plan, they should already be familiar with our advertising when they walk in. They should have already seen it consciously or subconsciously putting that together, because it does take about 3 exposures for someone to have that remembrance of what they've seen. So this is not intended to be standalone. It is intended to layer on top of what we already will have.
So is there any, I don't know that I got an answer to that question,
Sure.
Is there any consideration of theaters that have reserved seating or not reserved seating, or is it just?
We can ask. I don't personally know that answer off the top of my head, but we can certainly ask.
Yeah, I think what happens a lot of time is, people are using the app, and they're using like a Regal app or whatever. So when they use that, then they just, you just go in, boom, show it, slide in, and you're in there 2 minutes before. And a lot of people are using that. And I don't want to get hung up on this. The only reason I mentioned this is a little bit, I've noticed in theaters that, some of you may have noticed that, local churches in there, Biltmore, I've seen them in there. So, some of this works really good for local. It's a little bit like when you go to a mom and pop restaurant and they've got you know what I'm trying to say? They've got placemats.
Yeah.
They got placemats, they got things like that, which are really good, maybe good for local, but this reminds me a little bit of that. So all I'm saying is just measure it. It's $150 grand. I don't want to get hung up on that.
Yeah, I might also add, this is not the first time we've used this media tactic. We have used cinema in the past, and it's been a successful layering in of the media that we were using. I think the fact that you all are weighing in on when you've been at the movies shows that we are, we do have audiences who are the kind of audiences that we would want to attract who are going to movies. But this is a new tactic for this last couple of years, but we have used this in the past successfully.
And so we have measurable data to suggest that there's a good ROI on the spend.
Yes.
Okay.
It'd be good to see it.
It's good to know, because I think the general feeling here is that for the most part, I think everybody intends to go to the movies to get out of it what they want to get out of it, right? Like, I like the previews, so I try to get there right when they start. I don't care about all the stuff on beforehand. Some people avoid the previews. So if there's a large enough market of people that are going, that intend to sit there and see this, and we have a measurable ROI of some sense, then that's great.
That's actually also a really small example of really the entire media landscape, right? The way that consumers are consuming with their devices and their TVs and their radios. These days it's all on the consumer's terms, whatever that might be, and people are consuming the way they want to, and they're going to the movies for their own experience.
So we do have a number of measurable factors to understand what our audience is doing and what they like to get out of their media consumption as a whole, cinema inclusive within that. So we strive to plan against exactly what our audience's experience is and what they want it to be, and to be there to interact with them and engage with them on each platform during their personalized experience.
Now, the idea is that it's planned serendipity. So
Yes.
The consumer thinks that I saw that here, and I saw this here, but the reality is, because of the information we know about that audience, we are able to use these different touch points along the way, so the consumer is exposed over and over, and collectively, that creates the lift that we might not get if you measured any single tactic in and of itself.
I just think the other thing that we've liked about this opportunity is just the engagement and the level of immersion that you can get with, showing beautiful creative on a really big screen. And but thanks for all those comments.
And part of it is the clutter that's in the marketplace during this time period. So kind of takes us away from that with the political advertising.
Anybody have any other comments on cinema, or we can go back to the other one, right?
All right, so jumping back into TV and radio. So we're already doing this, but we want to make sure that we're continuing to maximize visitation from our key markets. So adding 2 weeks on air in those specific markets, and then selecting programming and channels with this incremental buy that align with our base audience, the ones that we know that can travel now and that have the income to travel now. This next piece is one that I'm personally really excited for. So digital billboards, we all know what digital billboards are, but this is digital billboards with a layer of data added on top of it. So in our markets, we can layer on data points for a travel intender, and then we can follow that group of travel intenders around the city as they commute from their homes to work and where they go after, and we can activate on boards that have a high propensity of travel intenders to be around them. So it's rather than just throwing up one random billboard and hoping that we find someone that's interested in traveling, we can follow them around the city to make sure that we're spending our dollars as smart as we can. So on those boards, we want to run brand and nonstop messaging. And then another piece to this is once we know someone has been exposed to one of our boards, we can then retarget them based on their cell phone and serve them a banner to then continue driving them further down the conversion funnel.
Yeah, having lived in New York for quite a long time, I, as a consumer, have a lot of experience with digital billboards and can still tell you ones that I saw years ago, and I was actually back up there last week, and even now, like United is doing very cool billboards where they'll track traffic and give you the amount of time it takes to get to certain airports, and walking through the city. And I know we'll also be in DC, which is quite similar. You have a different level of interaction, and you get a different level of each brand's story from their digital billboards. It just stays with you quite a bit, especially in this time frame when in the New York and the DC is much colder, and they're looking to plan warmer trips.
And the remarketing can include videos embedded in the remarketing, so there's a higher degree of storytelling after being exposed to the digital bill.
Yes.
All right. Cinema, we touched on that. Digital and search, we just want to continue with what we're doing, or what we have been doing to maximize all of our online signals, and then make sure that we continue to fund our search terms, all of our key search terms, so we make sure we're winning when there's hand raisers out there and they're showing intent about wanting to learn more about our destination. We want to make sure that we have the money in the market to be able to provide them that information and to bring them to our site. So nonstop flights, we want to try to simulate additional travel from the key origin markets, and we're going to focus on maximizing the load capacity with our inbound travelers. So right now, we're really just going to talk about the strategies and the media that we're going to introduce to this. The markets obviously are still up for consideration, but we're planning on trying to run about 5 million impressions April through June. It'd be an investment of around $150,000. So this is obviously designed to support the nonstop flight initiatives. The initial plan was a $50,000 investment back in the beginning. We're asking for a little bit more to help sustain and grow the capacity in these key markets. The markets that we're choosing are going to be based on a few specific data points, whether that's their load capacity, their operations, how often are they flying, and other things like that. This is going to be non-stop messaging and destination marketing. We're going to be using digital media for this, so high impact digital media, those rich media flashy units that you see online that really drive engagement and intent, as well as those digital billboards that we just touched on.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to being able to support and continue the growth of the airport and the huge improvements in capacity and non-stop flights that we've heard about earlier today. So looking forward to support and bring even more people from those specific markets.
Awesome.
So this just quickly showcases in the yellow where these dollars will support. So this is a very tactical media flow chart. We live and die by these, and what you'll see is the bright yellow is where these dollars will input. So we've got a couple of extra weeks in April of TV, and then we've got the cinema and the programmatic or out of home, which are those billboards that we talked about, as well as the high impact for nonstop. So this is just meant to illustrate where these dollars will be as it relates to our overall media mix. This is a very detailed view into that.
So we do have two requested actions, one for the supplemental campaign and one for the non-stop flights. But before we ask for that, I think Cindy and I wanted to make sure that there have been some questions, I think, bandied about regarding the ad spend, and we want to make sure that we clear up any of those misperceptions before we go into this, so that we're all on the same page. So about a year ago, when the agency was first hired, they actually during the selection process and then to this board, they made a presentation, and during that presentation, they noted at one point that they called it savings of $900,000. So what that meant was through their analysis of our previous media plan, they had noted that there was heavier weight in certain markets, particularly in television. And so that we were hitting a point, diminishing return point in those markets because the amount that we were buying during the constricted amount of time was very heavy. And so the media was not working as efficiently for us. At no time did they ever say we did not need that additional $900,000 plus. Instead, what they recommended was using it more efficiently and putting it back into various levels of that journey that the consumer goes through, from being exposed to the brand, the destination at the high level, and then learning a little bit more, putting them through that funnel to the point of booking. And so that's what this agency has done for us. And we just wanted to make sure that we put that out there and answered any other questions around that before we ask for the action. So is that understood? Okay, great. And so we've split this into two actual requests. One for the supplemental campaign that will help spring and early summer. And that amount is a little over $1 million. This is on tab 8 in your books. And so what we're asking for is a motion. And then these are the categories that they indicated that would be spent on. So I don't know if we want to take these one at a time and have a motion.
Yes.
One at a time.
Okay. So this would be the requested action on the first.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, a little discussion. Just out of curiosity, I don't know how others are feeling about it. Just when I think about we're spending more on advertising this year than we've spent any other year up to this point, if I'm correct. And the fundamentals, while not across the board, are generally pretty strong. And we're talking about taking over 15% of our rainy day fund to spend right now. I don't know how long it took to accumulate that $6 million. I don't know if anyone has an idea of that, but I'd be curious about that and whether now feels like the time to dip into that fund.
In our consideration of, bringing this to the board, I think those are good, valid, things to consider as you make that decision. My memory is that we were at about 2 million. So one of the things that contributed to the 6 million was an underspend of the budget last year, in part because of the timing and the transition of the agencies. We underspent and that accumulated. So, we're a little bit above budget. That will add to the fund balance. I think it's either choice is a legitimate decision for the board, either to continue, but we thought it was important to bring it now because I think the trend coming up, the things that we know for sure are that we have a 10% increase in supply coming in the next 12 months, and that that our efforts have been very effective. But if we continued at the rate that we have been able to achieve, we would still fall short. And so, you would expect a reduction in rate that's really driving wages, and the increased, benefit to the community, to small local businesses, is worth considering. The board had raised concerns about the impact of the presidential election, and I think that's a really valid concern. I think the media that's been recommended really helps to break through that clutter and to reach people, in places where, maybe they're trying to escape, from a lot of this political advertising. So we felt that our responsibility was to, be aware and cognizant of what might lie ahead for market conditions and to bring you the best value plan that we could. We sort of, considered carefully like what level of investment, and my comfort level at $1 million for anticipating other demands that would be coming. I felt comfortable at $1 million. I would not feel comfortable at $2 million. I think it would be kind of outsized and would be too much of a reduction in our fund balance.
I think from a timing consideration too, the reason we're bringing it now is as we walk into the early spring, that is when people are planning not only their travel during that time period, but really making plans for the rest of the year. I mean, this is the time of year when people go heavy into the marketplace because they understand that they are creating a level of awareness that should hopefully result in travel throughout the year.
And it's, and it is like it's not an addition to the budget forever. It's one-time supplemental, which has also been the practice of this board to use fund balance for kind of concise investments for one-time things. And so, we're looking at a big surge in supply. I think if we prepare for that and we generate an increased interest that, keeps us at a good level playing field, and then we get through that it's possible that, we could return to, after the presidential election, I would anticipate that we could return to, the level that was budgeted for this year, and, be in a better situation than if we do not proceed and we experience declines, and then it's kind of hard to get your momentum back.
So I've never been able to fully understand the financials, like as far as like really pinpointing exactly like where we are from a year-to-date perspective as it relates to the budget. How much more in occupancy tax collection have we realized this fiscal year than budgeted for? I struggle to find that number. I know that looking from a month-by-month perspective, we're up 5%, 3%, 0, 7, and then 8.
We're budgeted to be 3% over last year.
So what? So 1.6% above budgeted growth year over year. So what does that translate to in dollars? That's the number I struggle to find.
1.4% of 20 million.
Yeah.
But only for
a few months. Yeah.
For the first half.
Yeah.
So I think what's missing from the financials is a current month budget. There's a current month actual column, but not a current month budget.
Well, because so one of the
year-to-date actual versus
year-to-date
budget,
that we
right?
have, so we're on budget from an expenditure perspective. One of the limitations that we have is that we are not able to encumber funds, and so when we had hoped that would be something that we would be able to introduce. So when we sign a commitment on X millions of dollars of media, that is not reflected. It's committed, but it is not yet spent. And so we have internal practices that make sure that we're accounting for that commitment in spending. We also cannot seasonalize the budget in the current system. And so, we look back so we know where we are to budget from a revenue perspective, and we can look back to the year-end financials to understand that those are monies that are committed to the fund balance that will not be expended during the course of the year unless the board takes an action to amend the budget. So what we know for sure is, that we ended the year with a fund balance of about $6 million that is available for the board's discretion. The $9 million that hits the financials, we have gone back and forth over, the last couple of years on being able to present that in a way that's better from a management perspective. But, it's governmental accounting, and that's how it is.
I just kind of to expand on that a little bit. I mean, we look at a lot of different numbers, and we're ahead of budget. Budget's 3%, so we're probably 4 or 5% ahead of last year in growth. But we're focused on RevPAR hotels, which is another key indicator we got to look at. And as the supply goes up, that is really the critical factor. And beyond that is, what are we doing for the parts of our market that are really hurting? We're doing really good in downtown, Biltmore Village, but the outlying areas is where we need a lot more emphasis. And I'll just say one more thing, is the city got the moratorium, and we don't know what the city's going to do going forward, but one thing that someone said to me years ago was like, well, it's a cycle. The TDA does a great job advertising. They spend more on advertising, and they build more hotels. That creates more money, more advertising, more hotels. It just never stops. And now with the city like saying, whoops, we're going to slow this thing down. At some point, we're going to find an equilibrium. And I think that's a big issue to the community and also with the hoteliers in this board.
Yeah, I think the other thing that, for right now, the money that's in the fund balance was collected for a specific purpose. And, the board's only discretion is, the mandate is to utilize that resource for the stated purpose. And the stated purpose is to attract overnight visitation. And so I think the benefits to the community are very clear. I've mentioned before that we onboarded 115 new attractions last year and tourism partners. And so that overnight visitation is not only beneficial to lodging categories, but it's fueling a lot of economic activity for many, many types of local businesses, plus the expansion of air service and all kinds of other things. So, I think it's up to you whether you approve this or not. I think the need is fairly clear. I think the benefits to the community are crystal clear. And, as your president and CEO, I feel comfortable that from a managing the fund balance that, that this is a level of investment that's appropriate.
Well, nationwide indicators are pointing towards a softening of the market, and this will help address that, as well as ride the momentum that the airport is having with the new destinations as well. So I think it's a step we need to take a real strong look at.
Can you go back to the slide that showed the media spend and then what markets? Yeah. And I should know this, but I don't, so I'm going to ask anyway. The GRPs, what is that? IMPs?
That's a percentage. So GRPs are a percentage of the population you reach in one market.
Okay.
That's how you measure the percentage that you reach in Charlotte, Atlanta, Greensboro. It just keeps it apples to apples. And then impressions are just the total number.
It's just impressions.
Yeah.
And so when we get a result, would this extra, if we do approve it, will we get a separate hey, this is how it performed, or will it be lumped into?
It'll be lumped in.
Lumped into total.
I mean, they're all driving to the same goals.
Okay.
I mean, they would have, measurement tools for responsiveness of channels, to be able to see how those investments, but you won't be able to separate the 185 in these markets compared to everything else that's already there.
So, for example, search is all.
It's all the same.
I think to me, the really kind of the essential thing is that, that we're facing a larger growth in supply than we have ever had before. And so we've been successful at absorbing the supply growth, which was, if you looked back 3 or 4 years, we're like, wow, that's unprecedented. And we'd had an average increase in demand of about 2 to 2.5 points over 15 years. And we're like, wow, we have to hit 6%. And so, we've been able to basically do what needed to be done. But as we look forward, there's another level. Now, that's not gonna happen every year forever. It's gonna happen next year.
The cost of the presidential campaign, I think, is huge, too.
Yeah,
And that's a every 4-year.
It's exponential.
Well, one thing maybe that would help me is if we could look, this is where we're doing something, right now that's gonna help us for the next few months. I feel we ought to do have some study done to look at our projected occupancy by segment over the next 3 years. Because we know the supply that's coming in over the next 3 years. And really, let's do a little more long-term planning on the advertising. So we're just not shoot from the hip and say, hey, we got this supply coming on. Let's think about what we're going to be doing a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. So I think we can do those projections.
Well, and I think obviously that's dependent on the amount of investment that's made against that. I mean, we can see that historically, that, when we invest these funds, that it motivates the market and helps to affect that. And so, the media plan has been cognizant of, attracting visitors against different market segments. That goes to your other point about, who needs the help the most. So, all of this is a very, very complicated, marketing strategy at this point, and we also have a lot more data science behind being able to pull those levers. And so, but I think, we have been in the production of this for 5 months. So I think it is carefully considered, but if we're going to execute this, the decision has to be made today.
I think I'd like to add, as a non-hotelier in the room, how much a softening of the market can affect Highlands specifically. And so right now we're building volleyball courts, trails, and another event space at the brewery. And so our on-site business, as that contributes to our whole approach to the market, has become really important. And we were built as a manufacturing facility at first, but now the destination has become a critical part of our business. So softening, makes me nervous. And I think the proactive approach, I think the question is great. I think the proactive approach is really smart, keeping momentum. And at our last measure, 70% of our visitors were from out of town.
Wow.
Way more than I had expected.
I am for spending the funds, and I think that outside of our own supply growth challenges, we have to look at the fact that our comp set markets, more often than not, have experienced larger supply growth than us, right? And are going to be in similar situations, having similar conversations, and likely to be somewhat more desperate. And at that point, we have to spend in an effort to maintain, not only just grow, right? We have to maintain as they're trying to fight for share, as they have oversupplied more than us in most cases. In these markets. So I'm definitely for the spend. I think the one figure I'm struggling to grasp is how we're pacing so far at above budget. I just like what that dollar number is as far as collections, because I do think that having an understanding of the reserve fund in that number and how we're looking at replenishing it or what we're projecting it to grow back to is just something I would like to know. But I do think it's necessary to spend, and I think that we've seen a good presentation and a lot of questions have been answered and a lot of thoughts gone into it. I just want to have a better understanding of what we should expect to be replenished back into the fund, how we're pacing against that for the fiscal year. If somebody could at some point help me understand that better.
Well, occupancy tax is budgeted at $19.3 million and we're 4.6% above, so that's an additional $890,000 that we, as of this report, we'd anticipate bringing in. Every month is going to fluctuate.
Yeah, but as we're pacing, if we were to use that as a guideline, that's a rough number, and that's perfect. That's the only thing I was curious about is what replenishment rate kind of looks like, as our current projection is based on this as a spend. That's all.
And the other thing to be aware of is that the occupancy tax collection is largely a function of average daily rate, not demand, right? And so we could if the market performance decreases, then we could be faced with taking this money out of the fund balance just to meet our budget. And so you're not only stimulating the performance of the market, but you're also maintaining the revenue that funds those efforts. And so it's not really an either or. hopefully we'll have a performance that would replenish that.
But I hear it's kind of a vicious cycle. If you wait until revenues decrease, you have less money to spend on getting it back. If you're ahead of it while we're doing well, we have the ability to replenish to some degree if we're able to maintain current business levels. So.
Right, yeah.
Heard.
It's a proactive approach. Any other discussion? Questions? Is there a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just one.
Okay, and then we have a second for the nonstop life support, and that is in the amount of $150,000. So that would be in addition to the $1,005,750 that we just approved.
Any questions on that? Discussion?
Sorry, why is it separate?
We just wanted to make sure that you had two, that you could, if you wanted to just approve one and not the other, that they were two separate actions.
I mean,
And this would, we have $50,000 in the current budget, but, obviously we have a lot of lights that, are moving forward. I mean, you heard the good news. I think Tina and Lou would also appreciate a stimulating demand, from those markets. It also allows us to layer in our awareness levels in these key markets, and so we're doing a little bit more work around prioritization, but $150,000 would be on top of the $50,000 that is currently in the budget, which is a very small amount for what we're trying to do.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Gibbon, is there a second? Second. Mr. Luckett? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 7. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayfield?
Before she starts, it may be part of it. Gary, did we miss the art museum TPDF contract revision? It was on here and there was no discussion on it. I know it's in here.
I made comment that it's been pushed to next month.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right, so a couple things. I would say the big focus right now, and this is probably true for Joe as well, is starting to work on the budget. We've had one budget work session before our first meeting in January, back on the 14th maybe. We've got, I think, 2 scheduled for February, 2 scheduled for March, maybe 1 scheduled at the first of April, in early April, and then we get the manager's budget in May. So lots of discussion about lots of things. I think the big picture news there is that, and we've seen this coming, is that the city has a, I don't know how to do it. We have a structural gap in terms of the revenue that is available to us to meet the needs of the city, and and that's even to some degree just the basic, like just business as usual, not adding anything. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. Councilman Young and I have also put a proposal on the table for a 3-cent property tax increase to help meet some long-standing community priorities around renewable energy, affordable housing, tree canopy, and transit. So there'll be lots of discussions about how we're going to generate money, and just I like to make this point everywhere I can. The city has little option around generating new revenue. Really, it's just property tax, because Raleigh controls everything else. So, and we don't have permission to do anything else. So, for those who are upset about a potential property tax increase, which might include everybody in this room, sorry, but help us get permission from Raleigh to do some other things. That's what I would say. The hotel moratorium, John mentioned what's happening with that. On January 9th, there was an open public meeting with our Urban Land Institute consultants. Was anybody there besides? Yeah. Okay. It was very nice format, I thought. They put people around tables and asked a series of questions, got some good input. Apparently the discussions were very different at different tables, but I think they probably got a good cross-section of input around concerns around hotels. There's a meeting tomorrow night at 5:30 at the Civic Center for them to report back on their findings from that meeting and their other, just the other wisdom and experience that those experts bring to the subject. So that'll be a report back out tomorrow. Unfortunately, I can't be there, but hopefully some of y'all will. And then there will be a report to council. I think the city manager is scheduling maybe a special work session for us to hear both the ULI report and then also staff's sort of response to that and starting to make some recommendations about going forward. So the work on that is happening.
Julie, I maybe you can clarify, but I had the impression from those meetings that ULI's participation in this is over with this contract. I think a lot of people thought that they were, part of this and part of policy all the way through the end. So I don't know for sure. I have not seen that contract, but again, what they're going to be giving us tomorrow is their set of recommendations, and then those recommendations will, obviously go to the staff, obviously go to the public. We're happy to take anybody's reaction to those. And then the staff will be filtering through them and then coming back to council with specific recommendations about, how these recommendations might work in Asheville, or which ones make sense, which ones don't make sense, that sort of thing.
What's the difference between the first meeting and the meeting tomorrow night?
The first meeting was gathering public input. The meeting tomorrow night is ULI reporting back out.
Just review that report that's been sent out.
Has it been sent out?
The ULI report?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
I read something like 50 pages long.
When?
A couple of weeks ago. It had all the graphs in it and one of the things.
So that was probably I'm guessing that was maybe the book of information that the staff provided to ULI.
Oh.
Would that make sense?
Yeah.
As part of their helping them understand this market.
So they're reporting. They're going to review that.
They're going to review that, review the public input, bring their own experiences around hotels.
What I read, I thought the city hired them to do that report.
We hired them to make recommendations for policy changes that we might consider as a result of the moratorium. I think the book that you're talking about is the information that the city staff handed them as a way to inform them about the hotel market and situation here in Asheville. That's my guess.
And in that report, one thing I did notice was it grouped, hotels and restaurants together, showing they have the lowest, wage of all the sectors. And if you pull the restaurants out, that includes all the fast food and everything out, the hotel section would be probably maybe closer to the middle, or not at the bottom. That's the only thing I saw in that report that really kind of felt biased to me.
I think
I thought the information was good.
I'm sorry, John. I just wanted to point out too that 80% of retail is always lumped in as tourism, and only 20% of retail is attributable to visitor spending, and so the majority of the jobs in that category are not tourism jobs. And as we've pointed out a few times, there are only 2 sectors in our economy that pay above average, and last time we pulled the data on accommodations, they paid 18% more than the state average.
Okay.
All right, so that's the moratorium. There was a big presentation about Thomas Wolfe a couple of weeks ago, and there's some, I think that presentation set out some, I don't want to say expectations, but certainly some suggestions that the TDA might heavily invest in Thomas Wolfe. I mean, I certainly hope that's the case, but I've gotten a lot of questions about, is that recommendation, or is the figure of $100 million, is that the city's official recommendation for Thomas Wolfe? And the answer to that is no. So that was a presentation of a suite of work and an option for moving forward with Thomas Wolfe. So those of us on council who were there, we were seeing it for the first time. there's been no discussion at council about this is absolutely the path we want to go down. It will cost $100 million, and we are expecting these kinds of investments to do it. So just wanted to make clear that was a presentation of a concept and a price tag, but there's been no specific discussion or endorsement by the city council to move in that direction.
Do you anticipate what the process will be for making that decision?
We have not been informed of that, so I don't know.
Can I ask you a question on that? Did they look at, that's a renovation cost versus completely new structure? Do they look at that?
I don't believe this report did look at a new structure. There have been other efforts that have looked at building a new structure. And, you know, I think those costs are, well, I don't know.
That's basically a new, you know, I was at the police station too, it's basically a new structure in that spot. It's basic, because they're.
Well, the shell is the same, but everything inside.
Yeah, just
it
starting with a
drops
shell or
down,
anything,
it's
as I know, can be more expensive.
More expensive to do it.
You have some experience with that, John?
They made for some cool pictures.
I will say that the city has a very strong interest in, as between a new facility and renovating Thomas Wolfe, I think everybody's interest is in renovating Thomas Wolfe, keeping it downtown. I mean, there is really no other place downtown for a facility like that, and for all the reasons that make sense, we want to keep that kind of facility downtown, where there is already parking infrastructure, there is already restaurants, and remember, we don't have a parking problem downtown. People use the app. Use the app. So, you know, we want to keep it downtown. So we don't know what that investment is. And then the last thing I'll mention, we did this last night at council. So you may remember that Himanshu has been serving on the Energy Innovation Task Force, kind of representing this group. That was the partnership between the city, the county, and Duke Energy to help us avoid construction of a new peaker plant and kind of move us to clean energy as a region. Last night we officially dissolved the EITF, and we are moving that work fully to the Blue Horizons project, the future part of that work to the Blue Horizons project, which it is housed at a nonprofit right now. It will continue to be housed at a nonprofit, although we're going to put out an RFP to enable any nonprofit that wants to house this work to apply for that. So it's a really big transition, and I won't, if you're interested in the specific accomplishments of that, you can go look at the video from last night. But this effort over the last 3 years has, like so much of what we do here, has garnered national attention, has been celebrated nationally, written about nationally. We've accomplished things that are pretty remarkable for any partnership, much less one that between local governments and a regulated monopoly. So, you know, the first microgrid, utility scale microgrids in the state, almost 4 times more battery storage than Duke had initially committed to, 2 pilot projects approved by the Utilities Commission, which just frankly doesn't happen that often, specifically for Buncombe County. Just a lot of, and not to mention that we did avoid construction of the new peaker plant at $100 million, which saves us all a lot of money. So very, very proud of that work. Himanshu was a great participant, really strong partner. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
That's all I got, unless anybody has any other questions.
Thank you.
There's the $100 million for Thomas Wolfe. It's real easy.
Yeah. Go talk to Duke about that.
It's called Duke Energy.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. We approved at the last meeting $600,000 for a design of the Woodland towards the Greenway and Blueway. So we moved it from there's $500,000 set aside for construction. So I expect that when that comes, there'll be and everybody on the board support it. So I think in the future that we'll be okay on the construction too, as long as it stays reasonable in those amounts. So finishing up our strategic planning, and we went out to the community all over, and we've got great input, and we feel really good about that. As Julie said, they're in budget season. We're in budget season too. Our outlook is more positive than than Julie's is, and so I'm looking forward to working through all that. The lights at the told you about the lights at the ball field in Inca are on, but also the parking lot is on too. So if you get a chance to go out there, if you get off the exit and you go towards Candler, as soon as you get off the exit and pass the Holiday Inn and CVS, just look to your left at night. You cannot miss it. It's up there, and it's not. And we haven't got any complaints from the community on the lights. Yeehaw. So, and I would get emails if there was a big.
Joe, is the parking lot asphalted now, is it paved?
No.
Not yet?
But it looks great, and so we also appointed, brought back the Parks Rec and Greenway Board. We did open interviews for that, and we'll announce those at the February 4th meeting. I'm really excited about the people that are on there, because the board did a really good job in making sure that we had equity throughout the county. That we had, I mean, we've got a sweet little coach with there that's just, an average mom, and and those folks don't end up on a lot of boards. They tend to be, I'm just excited about that board. So there's a lot of people there that we're picking. We had consensus with the board, and there was no stress on it, so it's pretty cool.
So you've selected those people, and we'll announce them in February?
Yeah, we have decided, I think the ones that we want to recommend, we will do that in February. And like I said, there's consensus throughout the board on so. And I guess that's probably about it. But the budget's the big thing we're working through that.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Any miscellaneous business? New business around the table? Anyone? Okay. Comments from the general public? Lee, is that your bodyguard back there?
Oh, God.
Hey, good morning. My name's Dave Donnell, and I'm here with Mark and John. We're representing the Asheville Celtic Fest, and we'd like to first take a moment to thank the TDA for the Festival and Cultural Arts grants that was awarded our festival. Festival's in February, so just a couple of weeks from now. We're just here to kind of give back our support to the group that is supporting us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else? All right. Thank you for attending. Meeting adjourned.